architect.
Hey guys, welcome back to another Architecture Real Talk, and today's topic is quite interesting. Imagine receiving a phone call from Edgar Hoffman, and he's been waiting on design for you for several months. As Frank Lloyd Wright, you have 3 hours left to conduct a meeting on a project. You sketch something really quickly, and the client comes and you have finished your design. The house plans are done, everything is ready to go, and the client loves your building. 3 hours, you are able to come up with falling water. He has a whole team. He has everything at his studio that is at his disposal, yet he gets all the credit for it. And this is the era of Starchitects. The likes of Alvar Aalto, Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, all of these great architects are known by their works. Even though they have a team of draftsmen, collaborators, and things around them, then what happened to the industry of architecture? We evolved as a practice. The evolution in architecture occurred when we started realizing that we no longer can do it all. People could get things through the city with 7 or 8 drawings, and at the same time, it didn't require multiple disciplines. You didn't need a structural stamp to get your house through. You didn't need mechanical, electrical, plumbing. Well, you did need them to a basic extent, but the liability was not a burden upon the architect. There were so many things that we could do because the simple systems existed. We knew how electrical would eventually be taken over by a master electrician. You had a master plumber that would take over the plumbing. So you relied on basic sketches, but people were craftsmen back then. They would then bring their own ideals in, their own thoughts in, and they would be like, oh, you need a ceiling light here, you need a fan there, and let's go ahead and see how I can rewire this around the house. And as an architect, you would go about pretty much making sure that you have the right team to get the construction done. Fast forward to today, we need multiple disciplines on board. Sometimes we need interior design, but civil, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural. Then on top of that, the cities have placed a more and more stringent requirement, a higher code requirements, an energy requirement for the building to come across. Then you have things like LEED AP, green, and OSHA, and all of these various factors that make sure that the building is on par with today's standard when it comes to sustainability. So adding these layers to the building can no longer be a one-man job. And that led to a more team-based firm. You have to think about it this way. Culturally, we shifted from the ideology of hierarchy. Back when architectural practices were made, you had one person on top, almost like a pyramid, where the architect would then dictate design throughout their studio. And they would walk around the studio, people were hand drafting, and there was no dialogue between a electrical device or BIM software. People would go from hand drawings directly to your finished product, or sometimes use that as the basis to draft their finished drawings or plans by hand. So there was a dialogue that was done by hand that cannot be maintained when you go to a BIM software. But secondly, the hierarchy of having an architect in place and then the firm that goes underneath it. The architect would walk around the studio, would control it. Any project that he would get that were outside of his style, outside of his jurisdiction, he would simply let go. People gravitated towards good design, and that was the standard practice. Frank Lloyd Wright in the beginning did a lot of not great houses, but once he established a reputation, every one of his houses were a marvel because he had the potential of shutting down or taking away projects that he didn't want. So eventually the firm had this mentality of, we're going to keep this hierarchy. Then Frank Lloyd Wright himself ran all of the projects. He had nuances where he would actually indicate where the design needs to be changed. He would have juries. So he dictated all the design. But in a positive note, the rise of architectural firm as a collective has come to being. For example, what are the architectural firms of today? Morris Architect, PBK Architects, UNStudio, Gensler, right? HOK, and the likes. They're known as groups. Even though we might have Starchitects potential in there. Bjarke Ingels, but it's a Bjarke Ingels group, big architects. Tom Main is Morphosis. Ben Van Berkel is the face of UNStudio. But we recognize the studio. We recognize that even though that there's a main architect, he oversees a larger group, and that larger group is part of the collective potential or the creative design potential. So it has led to a more even playing field. These larger groups has allowed us to also get rid of that hierarchy that we had in architecture. It's no longer a pyramid, but more like circles within the actual firm. You might have something that's hospitality based. You might have something that's sports based. But it has gotten rid of this one-star architect. That culture has diminished. And to me, it's a positive. And to some, that's a negative, because we aspire to be Starchitects when we're in our studio. But we cannot have that dialogue if we are to be in a firm. And you have to think about it this way too. There's no longer this celebrity status associated with it, but you're no longer liable and getting bankrupted alone. Your whole firm protects you, the LLC shields you, and you move through, and at the same time, you come up with this work culture that is balanced, that is not based on trying to go up the ladder, trying to go to a specific triangle. You can have multiple principles and multiple departments within architecture that are still head and they're still recognized. What does this mean for architecture today? How do you guys think that is this a positive move in the realm of architecture, or is this something of a negative? And I know as a studio student, you are going to say, I wish I can be a Starchitect. But at the same time, consider if you were to be actually sued, how would that trickle down to? It would be you alone. Even though you're getting credit for it, you're also getting blamed for it. If you do something like a Frank Gehry building that reflects light onto another building, how would that reflect onto you? If you were to do a building that had a structural fault or something collapses, the liability falls onto the consultants that are in charge, and those consultants will target those contractors that built it. Then those contractors contact the subcontractors. And likewise, the diffusion of responsibility has allowed architects to shine, but at the same time, they're no longer in that spotlight. We're no longer celebrities. For those who have thoughts on this matter, leave it in the comments below. Until next time.
Follow for more content.